All right, it's 10:16. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. Good morning. Good to see some chats popping in about enrichment. We are going to be talking today about innovative calendar design and academic calendars, and how you can use your academic calendars to work with your SGS design to really impact students within your district. So some quick introductions here. My name is Brian Doran. I'm the Additional Days School Year lead here at the Texas Education Agency, and excited to talk to you about calendars, both within the context of Additional Days School Year, but also within the larger context of just calendars in general. We also have Dr. Lupita Hinojosa here from Spring ISD, who is the Chief of Innovation and Equity there. Dr. Hinojosa, would you like to say a quick hi here?
Sure, just hello, thank you for having us, and love to share our journey as we adopted our ADSY calendar this year.
Great, thank you. All right, so our agenda today, we're going to be kind of focused on 6 different components. First is aligning student needs in calendar design. We'll work through some district calendar spotlights of what that actually looks like in practice. We'll talk through how to actually fund this, what are the funding opportunities out there, and then jump into calendar planning and implications. We'll hear from Spring ISD from Dr. Hinojosa, and then just a quick highlight on a 22-23 calendar workbook to help kickstart any sort of planning for the 22-23 school year. So I don't need to really highlight this for anyone on this call, I'm sure, but I do want to start just with the current context of where we are and the importance of calendar design. So we know after a year of COVID, a year plus of COVID impact, that we need to catch kids up, and that we need to make significant changes in order to do so. And so here at TEA, we have 3 main strategies to catch kids up. First is rigorous instructional materials. The second is creating a supported teacher network. And then the third, which we're really focused on here, is this concept of more time. And the resource of time within the classroom. This includes both adding academic days and hours, as well as targeted teacher tutoring supports. So expanded learning time is one of the key strategies for COVID response. We know that we have COVID slide. We know that summer slide, in addition to COVID slide, can really increase the impact of that COVID slide. And so certainly, academic acceleration, additional academic instruction is important. But in order to kind of frame our conversation today about calendars, I do want to start with a quick story from a shadowing experience, a school observation experience I had about 1.5 years ago. So I think it was fall of 2019, just before Thanksgiving in 2019. I went to an elementary school here in the Austin area and had the opportunity to shadow a 3rd grade class for the day. And instead of your typical shadow a classroom and observe the teacher and provide feedback, it was more geared towards actually shadowing a student. So I was assigned a student, and my task for the day was literally to just experience school from the lens of that student for the course of that school day. So I arrived at 7 a.m. The student arrived at 7:15. We walked over to the classroom. It was in 3rd grade, so it was a self-contained classroom. All the core content was in with the same teacher. And as the student was eating his breakfast, it was kind of free time in the morning, and then we really kicked things off at 7:30 with an initial reading block. Read for about half an hour or so. I believe it was as a class, and just kind of reading communally. As I'm kind of sitting there fidgeting, I'm 6'2", so I was fidgeting in the desk. My knees are touching the bottom side of the desk, and it's a little bit uncomfortable. But we transitioned to math at around 8 o'clock, and we're working as a class through a set worksheet of problems that they had been focused on over the course of the previous couple weeks. And so basically kind of a review activity, and bringing everyone along. The teacher was doing a great job staying focused, of including everyone, implementing all the best practices. And throughout the course of this block, I'm taking notes, I'm trying to follow along on the worksheet, and around 8:28, about 28 minutes in, I notice my mind start to wander. I start thinking about what's going to be for lunch that day. maybe what I'm going to do after school in the afternoon. And, you know, as I'm going through this exercise, I'm taking notes. So I see that it's 8:28 where this happens. We continued that math block for the next 26 minutes. And so for those 26 minutes, I'm effectively, as a student, checked out. I'm not fully engaged. I'm having issues focusing, and the impact on students is they are potentially missing out on that academic piece. At 8:54, 26 minutes later, we transition to our enrichment class. I go to art. It's right before Thanksgiving, so we're working on creating a communal turkey for the class where we all are coloring in what we're grateful for on feathers. And I just go right to work. And it was exactly what my brain needed at that time to be able to focus on something completely different. That's much more of an enrichment piece, a brain break. And I was able to, you know, get that feather going. I wrote down what I was grateful for in the moment. That was my dog, Arlo. And then we transitioned back about half an hour later, and my brain was set. I was ready to get back to class. And so I want to set this framing as we are focused as a state, as districts across the state, on really accelerating students post-COVID. But I want to make sure that we are not just solely focused on the academics piece. There is time for enrichment. We do not need to throw out some of these enrichment pieces as well. So as we're talking through this, I also want to emphasize the connection of calendars to SGS. So through SGS, you'll be going through a quality seats analysis. This is really where you can identify what are your opportunities to impact students, and where are your campuses that have opportunity to impact students. So really, we're focused here on, you know, what is working for students, and then what do families actually want. And so this is an important piece for any sort of reassessment of your calendar redesign. I just want to emphasize the connection here between calendars and SGS. But let's go ahead and jump in now to what we mean by redesigning the calendar. So we have codified this as essentially 3 opportunities for districts to add instructional time. And when I say this, we're looking specifically at adding academic days, additional days to the school year. There, of course, are opportunities to add hours to each instructional day, and there's opportunities to add tutoring supports as well. We're focused today on adding days to the school year. So the first opportunity is summer learning. This is relatively straightforward. This is summer enrichment or remediation or acceleration over the course of up to 30 days over the course of the summer. The second opportunity is an intersessional calendar, where you're focusing on targeted remediation and acceleration. However, these days are spaced throughout the course of the year in potentially week-long chunks, and you're able to really support those students real time. And then finally, we have option 3, a full year redesign, where you are looking at a completely revamped calendar and essentially treating this as a 210-day calendar with daily schedule changes to increase teacher planning time and student play. So some quick examples here. First, with the summer program, we have Snyder ISD. So on this example, you will see that they have added 34 days through their summer program. So their last day of the academic calendar this year was June 11th, 21. And they started their summer program on June 14th. That is going through July 30th. And this is really based off of evidence-based practices from research. RAND did a study that indicated in order to not see summer slide over the course of a summer program or over the course of a summer, those students need to experience at least a minimum of 25 academic days. And those days need to be 6 hours with 3 hours dedicated to math and reading. So they are implementing an evidence-based program. They're going well beyond the minimum 25 days with 34 total. And then they are then starting the following school year on August 11th. So if you take a look at that summer, the length of summer break, students who are participating in the full summer program have only 1.5 weeks that they're actually out of academic content for the course of the summer, which means there is minimal opportunity for any sort of additional slide for summer to occur over the course of summer. With the changes to their calendar, they've also minimized the length of summer for the core for students overall to 8.5 weeks for students who are not participating in the summer program. The next option that I covered is the Intersessional Calendar. So Garland ISD is a great example of this. They went through an intersessional calendar this past year, 2020, 2021, and are doing so again in 21-22. And so for this upcoming school year, they're starting August 2nd, and they have 4 intersessional periods built in throughout the course of their academic year, fall, winter, spring, and summer, each one about a week in length. So 22 additional days total, with the summer intersession being, I believe it's 8 days with Fridays off. And so the end day for students next school year for Garland ISD will be June 9th for all students and June 23rd for students who are participating in the summer intersession. And so that means the length of the summer break, again, kind of looking to minimize the impact of additional summer slide. Is 7 weeks for students who are participating in the summer intersession and then 9 weeks for others. So fewer than what we might see in other districts of 11 or 12 weeks summer break. And then finally, a full year redesign example. This is from Aldine ISD. They have 2 campuses implementing a full year redesign this year in 21-22. So they're looking to add 30 additional days, and their start date is July 9th, 21. And they have done a strategic placement of ADSY days on Wednesdays throughout the course of the calendar year. And this is really to minimize attendance risks, which we can cover here in a second when I talk through ADSY funding and implications of ADSY funding. Their end date then is June 9th, 22. And their overall length of summer is going to be around 4 weeks for students. So really minimizing the length of summer again to minimize impact of summer slide. All of these examples, I know Megan is dropping these examples into the chat if you want to take a closer look at what this looks like from a specific calendar perspective. And all 3 of these campuses or these districts went through a robust process of defining what makes most sense for them and iterating off of those calendar examples. I want to focus a little bit more on full year redesign here because I think it's a great example in conjunction with SGS. So we have an opportunity with additional days with the 210-day calendar to really address some of the key stressors for both students and staff. So if we think through the student experience, similar to that art experience that I had firsthand, we know we could use more time for brain breaks for students, more time for play, more time for enrichment. On the teacher side of things, that time can then be used for planning. Core teachers in particular at elementary schools are responsible for a huge number of student expectations through the TEKS. It's not uncommon to hear of teachers working 12-hour days with minimal breaks. And then there's limited opportunity for job embedded planning. And so thinking through the calendar, by adding time, we can make room to address all of these barriers. So to do so, we're going to take 180 reimagined school days. We're going to add 30 additional days. And then with those reimagined school days, we're changing the daily schedule. We're slightly reducing your daily academic instruction, and we're adding that over the course of the additional 30 days. So we're not actually missing out on that academic instruction. We're just changing the exact timing and scope and sequence. Then with those daily changes, we're adding an additional recess, we're adding an additional specials rotation. And we're doing that each day. And so this has potential impact to make a much more sustainable schedule for both students and staff at this campus. And really impact, when I say recess and specials here, that's not necessarily how that would, of course, need to be used. But just knowing that we're looking for additional free play, enrichment, brain pick opportunities for students, and additional planning time opportunities for staff. All right, so that's the gist of like what this calendar redesign can look like. There are a couple examples in there, and we have a lot more resources that we can point you to at after this if you want to dive deeper into like what some examples look like. But I do want to talk through, you know, the how, the critical piece that might be going through many of your minds right now of, great, an additional 30 days, how do we pay for it? And so first and foremost, I want to emphasize the use of additional days school year funding. So this is part of HB3 if you're not familiar with it, and it adds half-day formula funding for school systems that are adding instructional days beyond a minimum of 180 days up to 210 days total. And this is eligible for pre-K through 5, so any elementary campus. I do want to emphasize this is at the campus level. And so if you are a district that is below 180 days right now, but want to target a couple campuses, all you would need to do is make sure those couple campuses are at 180 days and providing 210 total. Some key ideas here for ADSY eligibility, again, that it's at the campus level and it needs to serve at least one grade level within grades pre-K through 5. The academic calendar needs to have at least 180 days. That doesn't include staff development waivers. The campus academic calendar must have the traditional 75,600 operational minutes. The additional days, you must be willing to add up to 30 additional half days of instruction. Notice that we are saying up to there, so it's not necessarily you need to add 30 or none. If 15 makes more sense for you, that can also be impactful. For ADSY statute, in order to be eligible for funding for ADSY, you must have a certified teacher delivering at least 2 hours of instruction on those dedicated ADSY days. Anything after those 2 hours could be whatever you need. So if you want to focus on enrichment on those days, if you want to focus on something else, that works as long as you have that minimum 2 hours of instruction. And then finally, the ADSY days must be separate from regular instructional calendar days. So you can't kind of stack them on the same day. They need to be distinct so you're getting beyond the 180 days themselves. In addition to ADSY funding, there's also a number of additional funding sources that we see as beneficial for any sort of extended day or extended calendar opportunities. So this slide here covers a number of those. Some of them are competitive grants, some of them, and then some are formula funding based. So 21st Century, for example, is a competitive grant. Cycle 11 application just closed, but there are new grant cycles every 2 to 3 years. So I encourage you to take a look at those opportunities. Additional day school year, we've talked about early ed allotments. English learner summer programs can all be impactful here for additional days. This is much more focused on the summer learning side of things, but could also be creatively kind of stacked to support any ADSY model. So any of those summer, intersessional, or full year redesign model, given that we are inherently thinking about adding on to summer. So even though that we are calling it a full year redesign, that extends the academic calendar into the summer and is essentially summer learning. So think through state comp ed, the teacher incentive allotment, if your district is looking at the teacher incentive allotment and funneling those funds to campuses that are implementing additional days, that could be an opportunity to explore there. And then of course, title funds and opportunities as well. We also have a mountain of funding coming through with ESSER dollars. And so strongly encourage folks to take a look at through your strategic planning process, what makes most sense, and encourage people to think through that from a funding perspective there. And then kind of a final thought on the funding piece here is this idea of stacked funding. And so oftentimes we get into a mindset and a correct mindset of ensuring that we're not encroaching on supplement, not supplant restrictions. So any new funding sources are not, making sure that those aren't supplanting existing programming. What this can do is get us in a mindset that's almost too restrictive. And so an opportunity that we have here on the slide here is an example of combining ADSY funding and 21st century funding for a summer program, where traditionally a 21st century summer program would be funded solely from 21st century. And they would have a 4 to 6 hour summer program, and all of that funds would come from the federal 21st century allotment. What we have the opportunity to do, though, is expand this program through ADSY funding. The minimum requirement for 21st century is a 4 hour summer program, and then the minimum requirement for ADSY is 2 hours of instruction. And so if we bump those so they are essentially back to back over the course of a day, it is possible to utilize both funding streams. And from a student perspective, that looks like the same program. But from how we're codifying that within the funding streams, we're using both ADSY funds and 21st century funds. This is not just ADSY and 21st. This could be some sort of combination with any of these components here: early ed allotment, English learner, summer program, state comp ed, potentially a teacher incentive allotment as well. And we have a guidebook here, summer learning program budgeting guidance, that we hope can be helpful for folks as you're thinking through this budgeting piece. This starts to get into the weeds around stacked funding and going there. So I don't want to just dive into this guidebook right now, but do encourage you to take a look as you're thinking through your calendar redesign, what could be possible for SGS, and how to actually fund those programs. And thank you, Megan, for dropping these links in the chat here. I do see a comment here about braided funding and stacked funding. So just a quick plug, we are thinking basically the same concept there, braided versus stacked. We are kind of focused more on the phrase of stacked to make sure that we are keeping those programs distinct and separate, because it is not something where they should be supplanting each other. But just to make sure that they do stay separate within kind of the more official side of things. A couple fiscal timeline considerations for folks who are looking at ADSY funding here. So first, within the ADSY timeline, if you had the opportunity to project ADSY attendance within your annual budgeting cycle, or your biannual budgeting cycle, you'll see those funds flow to you throughout the course of your traditional funding disbursement from TEA. However, if not, that funding would be received in a settle-up process. And so I just want to flag that on the front end, where if you are concerned about cash flow, take a close look at this, make sure your finance team understands it. But just want to flag that. Additionally, there are some fiscal year considerations. So we have seen some districts who switch to an earlier calendar start date, and then are concerned about needing to basically double pay teachers over the course of July and August. So if their fiscal year ends August 31st, they're paying for the previous school year on an annualized schedule, and they're paying those teachers out through July and August. But then the next school year starts earlier than the previous school year. There might be kind of double payment considerations there. Again, if the cash flow on hand is fine, that might be less of a consideration. But just flagging that from the get-go, so we don't, so you're able to plan around it. All right, let's take a pause here. I know I just talked a lot, so I would love to see just some quick thoughts in the chat. As you're thinking through redesign and thinking particularly about this idea of a full year redesign, would love to hear what are some of the key considerations and barriers that are popping in your minds right now for the planning process for a calendar redesign. What would need to happen? What are some barriers? What are some things that you're thinking about? Also, feel free to hop off mute if you feel so inclined. thinking barriers. Okay, we're seeing including all stakeholders. That's a great one. Cross-functional team at the very start. Thanks, Adrian. Engaging the community on the whys of changing from a traditional calendar concept. That's big. Great. Yeah, keep those flowing. These are all big components. And I see a couple folks in the chat that have been heavily involved in this already. So let's jump forward here. And then just change management principles, right? Change is scary. All right. We'll jump here to Dr. Hinojosa here in a second, but I do want to just highlight some key considerations. We have a couple of districts, well, 14 districts across the state that have gone through a redesign process over the past year. 7 of those who are looking at a full year redesign, 7 who are looking at a robust summer program, research-based summer program. We have found many things stick out as potential barriers or as things to really make sure you're planning around. Stakeholder engagement being one of those key pieces. Also this budgeting piece, making sure that, especially on the summer learning side, your finance team is being brought along early and often, really on both sides, but it's more inherent within a full year redesign. And so just flagging that, that now. HR policies and what needs to be kind of reconsidered or redesigned. Do transfer policies allow your staff to opt in or opt out of a full year redesign campus? Do your instructional materials match a full 210-day calendar? Are your enrichment opportunities set up to be able to match that new calendar and the new time that you have and that you're working with? And then finally, of course, the district and site operations. Do you have summer work going on at specific campuses that make it so you can't use those campuses? Is your transportation system set up to provide additional supports over the course of summer? So all of these considerations to really focus in on, and it's going to look, of course, different for each district. We do have some resources out there right now for more specific to summer. I encourage you to take a look at one in particular, which is the Summer Learning Work Plan, which the goal here for this work plan is to identify high-level components of what needs to happen over the course of a year prior to implementing a summer program. So that can be found at bit.ly/Summer Learning Work Plan. The link that I believe Megan just threw into the chat. So kind of get the thoughts going there. So this is on the summer side. And then on the full year redesign side, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hinojosa, who has gone through a year-long planning process through the ADSY Planning and Execution Program to think through a full year redesign at Clark Primary and Intermediary and Spring ISD. And so I would love to turn it over to you, Dr. Hinojosa.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate the opportunity and appreciated all the comments that were coming through. So definitely, keeping top of mind this change process that needs to happen, that will be happening, and how do we manage that? And then most importantly, stakeholder engagement. So if we'll go to the next slide, just a quick update on who we are. We are Spring ISD. We are located right north of Houston, which, people used to think it's suburban, but we're really an urban district. We have an enrollment about 34,000, fluctuating, especially during this year of COVID. You can see our demographics there. We are a district with 87% economically disadvantaged, about 62.7% of at risk. One of the key pieces that really played a huge part in the discussion as we looked at the ADSY grant last year about this time was and is and continues to be that mobility rate. You can see our mobility rate is anywhere from 16% all the way to 43%. We are a minority majority district. And so that's just a quick overview. Oh, and the other piece, if you look at our district, we are on I-45. We are the little butterfly district. And so that mobility is impacted by that, that freeway that cuts right in between our district. And so next, wanted to really share with you all that are there. We are a district that just came into the system of great schools. However, we've taken advantage of all the opportunities that TA has presented, one being the ADSY grant that became available last year in the spring, as well as our school action fund grant. And what we did is we you know, as you all do every year, evaluate your schools and determine where they're at. What are the needs of the students, and what are the needs of the community? And so when these grants became available, we did look at our schools and determined we had 6 schools that were failing, persistently failing over years. And so we applied for the ADSY grant, which is the additional day school year. For Clark Primary, that is a pre-K through first grade campus. And then right across the street, we have Clark Intermediate, and they serve second through fifth grade. Then our other 4 schools that are listed there, they are part of our School Action Fund grant. And all 6 of them now comprise our I-Zone campuses. The reason we chose Clark Primary and Clark Intermediate to be part of our ADSY grant is really focused on the needs of our community and the needs of the students there. You heard Brian talk about the summer slide. Well, we knew because we were in the midst of COVID that not only were we going to face the summer slide, but most importantly, we needed to start planning for when we came back to school face-to-face for the COVID slide. These schools are 95% economically disadvantaged, the Clark Primary and Clark Intermediate, and their mobility rate is almost 34%. And so as we looked at the needs of these campuses, we really thought not only about the academic piece, that this school year redesign would allow us to address the academic needs of the students, but we also looked at it from the social-emotional needs of the students, and also just safety as well as their summer feeding program. These children come from majority multi-family homes, apartment complexes. And so by us looking at a year-long school calendar, it would give them that stability that they would need to support their academic, to support the social emotional needs, as well as just having a safe, secure learning environment. And on the next slide, as we went through this grant application process and coupling these 6 schools together, we focused on what the grant required, but also what we saw as research-based effective strategies that needed to be put in place. So at these 6 schools, they are part of what we call a district managed project. Started off with having really clear communications with the principals and the faculty. Brian talked about looking at all the policies that needed to be addressed. So HR is a big piece of this work. We knew we had 6 schools that now that were going into this grant, into this managed project process. We knew we had students that had been struggling, and we knew we needed to do something different. The tenets that we are addressing at these 6 campuses, including the 2 ADSY schools, is that high quality curriculum. We did a lot of research early on, partnering with TEA, and determined by January that we were going to be adopting the Texas Home Learning Resources, that we needed a structured reading and math curriculum. Blended learning is part of this requirement, and we know that our students need that type of learning, not only whole group, but most importantly, that small group direct teacher instruction. The extended day and extended year, we've had the 21st Century After School grant in our district, and it has supported our students in their extended learning daytime. We've applied for it again for this coming school year because it is critical to this work. The tutoring, the diagnostic assessments, and most importantly, as part of our ADSY project, is really looking at the mental health needs and the social resiliency of the students. You heard Brian talk about those mental breaks and how do we build it into the school day. So knowing we were doing this project, we had very strategic, what we called commitment conversations with our principals. Started with them because we knew we were running a district managed project. We needed them to understand, especially at these two ADSY schools, that the school calendar was extending to 210 days. So having frank, honest conversations with the principals, and they could decide to opt in or opt out. But this is what we were doing. Once superintendent, our chief of HR, myself, our executive chief of operations, once we had these communications with the principals and had the right principals on board, then the communications came followed with the teachers. The principals had commitment conversations, specifically at our two ADSY schools, to let the teachers know this is what we're doing. These are the tenets we're implementing in our school because this is what our children need. This is what our community needs. But also, please understand that we are extending our school year. And so our teachers were able to make a decision. This may not be the best place for them. They were allowed, if they opted out, to transfer within the district because we wanted to keep our teachers in the district. This was not a way to move them out. We wanted them to stay, but we wanted them to know up front that this is the change that the schools were going through as a response to the needs of our students. On the next slide, I have to say, and you all put it in the chat, and I'll tell you, met Brian early on via email and phone calls, phone conversations, because there were some challenges. As our executive leadership met together to discuss what needed to happen, we saw right away challenges. Number one, that operating budget, right? The ADSY grant funds that half day, but we had to come up with the other half of the operating expenses for our teachers, as well as transportation costs, the child nutrition, custodial services. All those pieces are big rocks that you've got to be upfront and having really clear, open conversations with your CFO and your entire cabinet on how you're going to address this. How you, as TEA has shared, how you can stack your budgets, but most importantly, thinking about your staff. You may find the funds. We were fortunate with the ADSY grant and stacking all the other budgets, but the other pieces were really critical for us. The decrease in availability of teaching staff. All right, we're in COVID. I don't know about you all, but we've had staff that's retired. We have other, the number of applicants that are out there are not as large as we've had in the past. And so there's a decrease in the teaching staff that's out there, as well as the staff in your schools. I have to be very honest. I had this conversation with Brian maybe a month ago. We had this conversation in February because we knew it was coming. But now that it's here, we've had staff that's resigned. They've decided that they can't do the extended for teachers. It's 217 school days or work days for them. And then there is a decreased time for staff development as a whole. You'll see how we've built in time during the day with that flexible school day for additional time for teacher PD. But we do huge academies in July. So our teachers in the ADSY schools will be participating in their own academy, not the academy that the district normally offers. So these were challenges that we identified in January and started working through with our leadership team to make sure that we were able to address. On the next slide, just to walk you really quickly through the calendar development timeline. While it looks, and it did, our board did approve 2 calendars. But one of the things, as you consider going through this process, you must consider how ADSY fits into your traditional calendar. We are doing 2 schools, full schools. The project allows you to do 1 grade level in a campus. For us, that didn't make sense. It's the need of the entire school community, right? So we started our calendar process officially, on the books in December, although we start the process much earlier, having the conversations. But in December was when we brought our committees together. We have a very robust process to adopt a calendar here in Spring ISD that includes a calendar committee, but also our superintendent's advisory committee. We call it our ACE committee. It's made up of teachers, central office, community members, and parents. So that process started in December. While we were adopting the larger district calendar, we went on ahead and spoke about the ADSY calendar. We needed to know that while we were adopting this calendar, an ADSY calendar would follow in, and that is very important to the whole group discussion. So we went through that whole process, and by February adopted our district calendar. Our board approved the district calendar. And they knew and understood that immediately following, we would be bringing our ADSY calendar. So discussions with the district-wide, and then narrowing down and being strategic and involving the staff of the 2 schools that would be a part of the ADSY calendar and the community. So right after our district calendar was adopted, then we narrowed it down and began the discussions with that specific community. We do have, we're very fortunate, and we do have an assistant superintendent that oversees these 6 campuses, and then of course all the principals. So they led that work, meeting focus groups with the staff, focus groups with the community, and then surveys were conducted to really understand what were the needs. And ultimately they came up with 2 calendars, which was then sent out to the impacted community, and they had the opportunity to vote on the calendar that they selected. And so again, I want to emphasize that stakeholder engagement, the assistant superintendent and the 2 principals really involving their community, that's key. Because you do need to have your community completely aware of the changes that are being made, but most importantly, the why. We started a few slides back talking about the needs in Spring ISD, most importantly, the needs at these 2 campuses. And we finally adopted our calendar on April 13th. Our board has been receiving updates on our project all along, and we're ready by the last update that we gave them at our April meeting to then adopt their calendar. And so on the next slide, you'll see the 2 calendars, our traditional calendar, and our community at large gets to vote on our calendars. So you'll see that our District of Innovation calendar does say option B. We put out 2 options and they get to vote on it, and we always leave it labeled so they know which one it is. You'll see that in our traditional calendar, district-wide, we've gone to 180 days. We truly believe that our students need the full amount of time that we can give them with our teachers coming back face-to-face. Teachers come back on August the 4th, and you'll see that we've got some professional development days there built in. And then our last day this year in the 180-day calendar is right before Memorial Day. And then you'll see our ADSY calendar, Clark Primary and Clark Intermediate. Our students will be coming back on July 19th. And while, Brian explained, you don't have to take the full 30 days, your year 1 going out, and we toyed with it. We ended up adding the 30 days because the community, our children, need the additional time. And so children will be coming back their first day on July 19th. It is a full day, not a shortened day. It's a full day for them. Our teachers actually come back on July 13th, and they will go through their professional development that week. The rest of the district goes through their professional development on July 19th. So we're having just a special academy for the teachers at Clark and their leadership teams. And you'll see in blue how we've added 3 weeks right before school starts, before all the other children start. And you'll see that at the end of the year, we also add, another 3 weeks to the end of the year. We believe that this will, address the need for the extended year so that we don't have that summer slide. But most importantly, because our days are built such, our daily schedule is built such that students have additional enrichment time, this will give teachers time during the day to plan and learn the new resources. As I shared earlier, we are adopting our Amplify Reading and Eureka Math for the elementary. So teachers will have time built in during the day to do that additional planning, that additional learning, those PLCs that are so critical, while the students will have time for the enrichment time, for the time that they need for their social emotional needs and really that resiliency that they need to have built in as they go through the academic day. And I think I hit the highlights. If there are any questions for Brian, if I missed anything from our work.
No, I appreciate that overview and these tangible examples. Megan dropped in the chat a direct link to these examples, so I encourage you to take a look if you're interested. But thank you, Dr. Hinojosa. I do want to open it up, knowing that we have a direct district practitioner who has gone through this exact process right now. If anyone has any questions for Dr. Hinojosa, please feel free to drop them in the chat and or come off mute right now. We also have, I believe, one other person who's gone through the full year redesign process in the call right now. So if there's anything else, not to call you out, Adrian, but if there's anything else that you would like to add about your experience, we'd love to hear anything as well.
Yeah, hi, this is Ageless Chief Transformation Officer Aldine. It was a great presentation here. You know, we went through this process. We started early in July, getting that cross-functional team and really setting those dates. The great part of this work with TA is a technical assistance provider that we had to go through the process. So that really helped streamline the work and help project managers through the process. It really helped get us and guide us, even to look through and work with other districts in the state. As we knew we're not the only ones doing this. I know Spring and A-Leaf in Region 4, other districts who did this work. So kind of connect and see what they were doing and we were doing. I think the biggest part you all had said at the beginning was the financials and the operating costs. Because we do get House Bill 3 funding, there is a cost to the districts that come with it. And the sooner that's brought up and the sooner you can determine where that pot of money is coming from, the easier it is to navigate the process. The number one question we got in Aldine from the teachers themselves is, what's my compensation? They were on board with the work. They know the students need it, but at the same time, we have to, we need to pay them for their time with that. So one thing we did not do, and I don't think I heard it say is that we didn't take teachers off their 187 contracts. We left them alone. So we are paying the teachers their daily rate for the additional 30 days in the district to work that side of it. So teachers, we had 0 teachers leave our 2 campuses to do this work. So we were happy that teachers were all in this action. And we thought, well, we may get a mass exit here if nobody wants to work 30 extra days. But the why behind it and communicating it early and often is key with it. So the financial piece, the HR piece are key with it. But then the next piece is actually that day that you're going to do. Like, what does instruction look like on that additional day school year? And understanding that day is separate ADA funding. It's not part of your regular funding for the district. So that's a key on there. And there's no grades associated on this day. This is truly intervention, brain break, accelerated instruction, and bringing electives to the students. So we had a lot of positive feedback, even from our board members, seeing that, oh, this is great. Can we do this at other campuses as well? As we said, well, we've got to pilot it, get some success from there. So I would love to see where we all are at next year at this time and we have our data. And I'm really anticipating seeing big growth from our students at these campuses.
Yeah, great. And just to highlight for folks here, a couple thoughts here. So both Spring and Aldine went through what we call the ADZI planning and execution program, which was a year-long planning process. We are planning a cycle 2 for that process, which would fit very nicely with a SGS kind of process as well. Be on the lookout in the coming weeks for more information there, and we'll make sure we also get information out to the SGS group in general. The second piece to kind of Adrian's point here on ADA is ADSY funding itself is essentially a 7th 6 weeks attendance reporting period that is separate from the regular school year. These days are actually, they are officially optional or non-compulsory rather by statute. And so we have seen districts designing their calendars in different ways to try and maximize attendance on those optional days. So you'll see Dr. Hinojosa and Spring ISD chunk them at the beginning and end of the school year to make sure that they match the rest of the school year within, or the rest of the calendar for Spring ISD. What Aldine ISD has done is put those days strategically on Wednesdays throughout the course of the year to make them less, to give less of an appearance of kind of an optional block of days. And so we anticipate both options will work, but there's kind of things to toy around with there. One kind of quick question here before I move on to the last piece. For both Dr. Hinojosa and for Adrian here, I'm curious to see, certainly teacher retention and staff retention and interest is important, but given that these days are non-compulsory, how are you gauging, or how do you feel about student recruitment right now? Are you confident? What's that looking like?
For us in Spring, we're confident that our students are coming. Number one, our community really values the school. The school is the center of the community. While we have a high mobility rate in these schools, the parents are committed to coming to school. So we don't foresee, we've already started, what we call updating the records, right? So all of the returning students, the families have done that. We're also launching another, we started that early in May. We're launching another campaign right now in July to make sure that they get, their records updated, what we call re-registration. And we've already done for our new students the recruitment for pre-K. That is a big group that we lost enrollment during COVID. Our pre-K and our kindergarten students, those numbers really were dramatically impacted. And we've been very fortunate to have partnered with Good Reason Houston here in this area, and have launched a pretty robust campaign to be able to recruit those students and really get them back. Number one, inform the community of what we are offering, the full day pre-K, of course, our kindergarten program, but most importantly, to talk about the safety of the children coming back. And many of you may have experienced, many of our Latino families did not return to face-to-face school. There's a lot of fear. And so we've done a campaign to really share with the community, our Spanish-speaking community, that the schools are safe. And just did a talk with a doctor here from University of Houston to really talk about, the safety in the schools, the virus, the myths, and misconceptions. So really trying to address the fears of why many families kept their children home and trying to make sure that they all come back. So confident that our enrollment will be back full speed ahead on July 19th.
Great. Adrian, any thoughts on your side?
Yeah, so we've been doing a big push to get all of our students back since May. We've been doing call outs, phone outs, sending home flyers. Out of Ermel and Vines Elementary, the principals had drive-throughs for the families with letters. We've been flooding them. That first week of school, when teachers come back, we're gonna have days at each day of the professional development that the teachers actually call home and let them know to remind them school starts this Friday. That communication's been going on all month. Hey, it's coming in January. This is February. Or even had parent nights and Zoom meetings. And some parents were like, "Oh, I was unaware of this," and they're like, "Oh no, we were all here. Look, you were here. Here's a note that we all know about this." So our principal is actually at the elementary school. He grew up there. He went there as a student. He was a teacher. He was a skills specialist. He was an AP, and now he's a principal. So he is that community, and that voice that he carries. The parents in the community they're all in with him. So he says school is happening, and the parents are there. So we're anticipating to have full attendance on that side of it. Our schools, as we mentioned, we had the hybrid learning option or the remote learning option. Our elementary and primary schools actually had higher face-to-face attendance than our high schools. So we're excited about it. But there is that fear, like, are they gonna show up on that first day? So we just can keep pushing it, keeping calling, have those call outs out for our families, and just ensure that, hey, we're going to be here, the teachers are going to be here, and what better place to have our students in the building to continue learning. I know we're solving for summer slide, but now we have this pandemic that happened, and this is really going to help our students close that gap and accelerate with their learning on there. So we're excited for that push. So we know on the first day of school, we may have to still call families and let them know, hey, school is starting. Where are you? But we're ready to deploy teams if needed.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Well, let me cover one other thing, but thank you, Dr. Hinojosa, for such a thorough kind of description of what's gone on at Spring ISD over the past year. And thank you for chiming in about your experience as well, Adrian, at Aldine. Dr. Hinojosa has some contact information here on the screen, both for Dr. Watson, the superintendent at Spring ISD, as well as for herself. So do feel free, I hope I'm speaking correctly here, Dr. Hinojosa, do feel free to reach out with any questions, and as we build this network of folks who are looking at a more comprehensive redesign. And then finally, I do want to cover, as you're thinking through this process, of course, we are, June of 21. It's a little bit late to be doing a more comprehensive redesign for 21-22, but I do want to highlight a resource that we have available for 22-23. And so this is kind of it's a calendar workbook intended to help you think through different options in a quick and easy way about how to design a school year. And so we have pre-populated some, basically the federal holidays, and then categories here for regular instructional days, ADSY days, or other non-instructional days to help you kind of keep track of how many days are being populated, and meant just to be a quick resource for you to kind of get the juices flowing. So feel free to take a look there if you feel like that would be useful. Other than that, that is what we have to cover today for calendar redesign and how to kind of address this idea of more time with the calendar. Thank you everyone for attending today. Do feel free to reach out to both of us with any questions. I am always happy to chat intricacies of ADSY policy, and as well as point people in directions of the exciting things that districts across the state are doing, including Spring, including Aldine. So very glad that everyone was able to join us today. Again, thank you very much to Dr. Hinojosa for sharing your expertise, and really looking forward to seeing the impact on Clark Primary and Clark Intermediate next year.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and to everyone that's still here, definitely Brian responds and is very open to questions. So don't worry about any questions. You can reach out to me, but I can attest that Brian, if he doesn't know the answer, he will find the answer for us. And so just really appreciative of all the support, Brian, to get us through this planning phase and now for our launch.
Great. All right, thank you everyone, and have a good rest of the SGS Summit.